Susan! A voice echoed from behind as Susan's eyes met with Mr. Dennis, who could not believe if truly she was the one or a ghost. Susan and Mirabel grew up in a small quiet village as orphans. Facing their trials, they struggled through life alone. Susan was the oldest, always looking out for Mirabel. They were very beautiful girls. Susan did not mind living in the village. She worked hard enough to take care of herself and her sister. Mirabel, on the other hand, had always dreamt of moving to the city, a place different from the four corners of the village. Susan found love with a young handsome man named Akin, whom shared the same story with her. Akin was an orphan too. He was hardworking and together they all lived under the same roof. However, things took a bad turn when Susan had her first child, Bamidele. Their income ceased all of a sudden. Customers stopped patronizing them. Their crops in the farm all went bad, leaving them at a great loss. This drove the family into hardship. Susan took on menial jobs, which Mirabel assisted her with most of the time when she was not babysitting Bamidele. Few weeks passed, still Akin was not able to get a job. For no reason, people were not willing to employ him, and so he came up with an idea. One evening, as they were all gathered, he told his wife that he would love to follow his passion of being a goldsmith. Maybe now that I have no job, it's time for me to follow my dream and do what I love the most, Akin said. Susan was shocked. How would you get such capital to start that business? Moreover, gold is not cheap. I know the business is lucrative, but we cannot afford it, Susan replied. Maybe you should start with normal metals before you can proceed with gold. I heard the popular jewelry maker comes from a far village. If you can put this through, it will be very big. I can help with the beads and other crafts too, Mirabel said. This came as a good idea. Few days later, Akin set up a small shop and began crafting metals into beautiful pieces. Akin would do the metals while Mirabel would place the beads. They were beautiful pieces, but they made no sale as the rich did not want to use anything that was not gold, while the poor simply could not afford their jewelries. Weeks passed, still, they had just few sales, barely enough to make up for the raw materials used. This troubled the family so much, but they kept on pushing. One day, as they were all going about with their day, a white tourist from a foreign land came into the shop. He was going around the village when he sighted a beautiful piece from Akin's shop. He admired the craft and asked who made them. Akin responded as he complimented him. These are very beautiful pieces and your crafts are so neat. Can you make something with gold? He asked. Akin responded, stating he could. The white man offered him a job in the city as he wanted to venture into jewelry making. If you are interested in the offer, meet me in the palace where I'm staying in 2 days. Akin thanked him for the offer and asked him if he could come with his family. But the man refused, stating that there was no more space in their cargo. Akin was disappointed, but he asked if his sister-in-law could come along because she was the one who made the beads, stating he was only an expert in goldsmith and not beading. It seemed she would be needed. I'll make space for her, he replied Akin as he took his leave. Akin was so happy and sad at the same time. He went home and shared the news with Susan and Mirabel, and they also had mixed feelings. Susan was sad because she did not want to be separated from her husband and sister. However, she agreed because the opportunity was huge and it was one that could change their lives forever. They made an agreement to be reaching out and also to bring Susan and Bamidele over when they fully settle in. Mirabel was the happiest. Her dream of leaving the village had come to pass. As the day came, Susan gathered all the money from her business and gave it to them to use for the few days. She packed up some food items and gave it to them, bidding them goodbye as tears rolled down her cheek. Those few days, Susan cried her eyes out. She started missing Akin and Mirabel, but she continued to pray that they both succeed. They traveled to the city took 3 days. Immediately they got there, Mr. Dennings, the white man, showed them their apartment beside his mansion. It was like heaven to them. They had never seen a place like that in their entire life. They were marveled. The city was filled with lots of beautiful houses and a life that was different from what they were used to. Mirabel swore never to return back to the village again. Mr. Dennings smiled as they expressed their gratitude. He was a very good man. He showed them the factory and in a couple of days they began working. Oh, before I forget, there is a postman who could help you deliver any message to the village, just in case you want to reach out to your wife, Mr. Dennings said to Akin. Akin and Mirabel were so happy. They wrote a very lengthy letter expressing themselves and also telling about their experience and sent it to Susan. About a week later, Susan received it. She was so happy to hear from them. The letter gave her hope and reassurance, and she became certain that they would all soon be united. Akin and Mirabel started working for Mr. Dennings. They put in all their best and attended a few trainings. They would both send money back home to Susan and Bamidele along with their letters. Susan was very happy and she continued to pray for them. This continued for months, but after some time, Mirabel developed feelings for Akin. Being that they were both living under the same roof, the feelings were hard for her to control. Poverty had prevented her from noticing how good-looking Akin was, but she was not the only one who felt so. The feeling was mutual. As days passed, they became very attached to each other. Mr. Dennings traveled overseas to meet with his family and left Akin and Mirabel in charge of his business. With no one around, they found this as an opportunity to let loose, causing them to be intimate. This continued for a long time while Susan was still struggling in the village trying to meet ends need as the money was no longer coming in as usual. Weeks went by and Mirabel became pregnant for Akin. They decided to keep the pregnancy without letting Susan know about their secret. Having made money and living their best life, they completely neglected Susan. Susan was worried because the letters stopped coming. She met with the postman and asked about Akin and Mirabel, but the postman had no information. Knowing that Susan will begin her search for them, Akin came up with a devious plan. They paid someone to go to the postman and tell him that they had died from a tragic incident at the factory. They gave him some cash, stating that it was from the company to help her get back at her feet. The young man delivered the message to the postman and parted away with the money. Akin and Mirabel got rid of their guilt and started living as husband and wife. Back at the village, Susan received the letter. This was devastating. She fainted when she read it and was quickly resuscitated. She never regained herself. Every day, she would cry at the grave she dug for them, wishing they had remained with her in the village. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Susan was still grieving the loss of her husband and sister, while Mirabel gave birth to a baby girl. People around thought they were a married couple and envied them. They were well respected. The company was doing well, and so was Akin, Mirabel, and their daughter Simi. A couple of years passed, and Mirabel had another child. They were so happy that they forgot the reason they came to the city in the first place. Meanwhile, at the village, Susan finally found the strength to get back at her feet, as she was the only one Bamidele depended on. Her son became her only source of joy. She did all she could to give him a good life. Susan was very pretty. It did not take long before suitors started pursuing her, but she turned them down, stating that she would want to focus only on herself and her son and lean on the memories she shared with Akin. The white man had just brought the child training center into the neighboring village. Susan saw that as an opportunity to get an education. She went to school alongside her son. She wanted him to have a decent life that did not involve hardship. Susan did excellently well, and in 3 years, she became a teacher in the village, which was a great benefit to her son and the villagers. She earned the people's respect and soon became an example for young girls in the village. Susan worked very hard, providing everything her son ever wanted. At 15, Bamidele acquired a skill in goldsmithing. He had heard a lot of wonderful things about his father. Although he had no idea how he looked, Bamidele lived a life that he would be proud of. He dreamt of being a goldsmith and jeweler like his father and auntie. But Susan advised him to get an education so he could own his own company like Mr. Dennis. Few years later, Bamidele graduated basic school and it was time to further his education. The only way to do so was to go to the city. Susan wanted the best for him, so she gave him the money she had been saving, shared words of wisdom and prayed for him as he departed for the city. She continued teaching in the village and making changes in people's lives. Meanwhile, Akin and Mirabel, now consumed with greed, started living extravagantly. They began to embezzle the company's funds, which made the company lose a lot of money on a daily basis. Not too long, tragedy struck. Mr. Dennis lost his wife and only child. He decided to return back to Nigeria as life abroad became too lonely. On getting back, he found the disaster Akin had made. They had wasted the company's funds and converted Mr. Dennis's mansion into theirs, hoping he would never return. This act triggered Mr. Dennis and he immediately fired them. After a series of begging, Mr. Dennis showed no mercy. He became even disappointed when he learnt about Akin and Mirabel's affair, but they told him that it started after Susan's death. On hearing this, Mr. Dennis felt pity for them, wondering how hard it would have been to lose a wife and son, considering he too was still mourning his family. For this sake, he forgave them and gave them a second chance to right all their wrongs. Back at Bamidele's school, he did excellently well in his academics, but even did better in his jewelry making. Soon, he became popular in Lagos. When Mr. Dennis heard of him, he offered him a part-time job at the company with a good pay. Bamidele was introduced to Mr. Akin as the new staff in the company. It was the weirdest scene. Both father and son had no knowledge of each other. Akin was not able to recognize his son, and neither did Mirabel. As days went by, Bamidele did well at work, His craft were extraordinary, which made Mr. Dennis regard him highly. But Akin was not pleased. He hated it whenever Bamidele was praised and appreciated because he had always been the best. Akin and Mirabel hated him and tried all they could to get rid of him, but it was to no avail. Akin once burnt his finger with an iron, pretending it was an accident, but Bamidele forgave him regardless. Mr. Dennis started noticing everything that was happening and knew he could no longer trust Akin. As time went by, Mr. Dennis became attached to Bamidele. He reminded him of his late son. One day, he asked Bamidele about his family. Bamidele told him everything about his mother, stating that he lost his father when he was still a child. Mr. Dennis felt sad for him and wondered how hard it must have been for them. Bamidele was an asset to him. He had done a great job in bringing the company back to its glory, and so he promised to bring his mother to the city and give them a good life. Mr. Dennis was surprised when he learned that Bamidele was from Sako village. "I know of someone that can go over and bring your mother. That place is like my home too," he said to Bamidele as he was so happy for his mother to come to the city. A week later, Susan arrived in Lagos. She was so thrilled to hear that her son was working for a big company, even when he was still a student. On seeing her son, Susan wrapped her hands round him, giving him a tight hug, as she expressed how proud she was. "Susan," a voice echoed from behind as Susan's eyes met with Mr. Dennis, who could not believe if truly she was the one or a ghost. Susan was shocked to see him too. "Is he your boss?" she asked her son. Bamidele responded, as he was also confused about what was going on. Susan walked towards Mr. Dennis. "I heard about what happened at the company years ago. I am happy nothing happened to you. This is not how we all planned it, but God knows best, and they are at rest now. Thank you so much for the opportunity you gave to my husband and sisters years ago. I know they will be smiling when they find out that you are still helping till date," Susan said to Mr. Dennis as she expressed her gratitude. "What are you talking about? I was told you were dead. How come I'm seeing you in flesh?" Mr. Dennis asked in confusion. "Me dead? Who could possibly tell that lie?" Susan questioned. "Your husband and your sister. They told me that you had died when I returned to the country few months ago," Mr. Dennis responded. The room was filled with confusion. No one understood the other. "Come with me. I think he's in the best position to explain," Mr. Dennis said as he took them to Akin's flat. When they got there, lo and behold, Akin, Mirabel and Susan's eye met with each other. When this happened, Susan called their names and fainted. She was rushed to the mansion where she regained consciousness. After a while, she learned that she had been deceived all these years. Mr. James, the butler who had been working for Mr. Dennis for years, narrated everything to them, also sharing that her husband and sister were married, with children, and had been living comfortably for years. Akin was shocked to find out that Bamidele, the boy he hated, was actually his son. Akin and Mirabel tried apologizing, but Susan burst into laughter, one that was filled with so much pain. "I was such a fool to have trusted you both. After all I did for you, I gave all that I had and even turned down marriage proposals just because of the love I had for you." She looked at Mirabel, smiled and said no words as she walked away with Bamidele. Mr. Dennis, upon hearing the true story, was filled with anger and disgust. He called the police and threw them out of the house. Akin, Mirabel, and their children were forbidden from ever stepping foot into the house. With barely enough money on them, they wandered the streets looking for shelter, but everyone resented them. No one was even willing to rent out their house to them because of how ruthless they were. The once respected family were now rejected. Mr. Dennis continued to console Susan and Bamidele, promising to take good care of them henceforth. Susan took off her wedding necklace for the first time in years and dumped it in the dustbin. I have held on to Akin for too long. Now, I am going to start living for myself, she said to Mr. Dennis and Bamidele. Mr. Dennis felt a chill in his spine. He admired her loyalty and began to have feelings for her. As weeks passed, Bamidele continued to work and study hard. Susan got a job at the Ministry of Education and finally decided to rent her own apartment. She told Mr. Dennis about it, but he was not too happy with the idea. Please, I do not want you both to move out, he said to Susan. Susan was surprised. I know your heart carries scars, stories of promises broken, and trust shattered, Mr. Dennis said, with his voice filled with warmth and sincerity. But in the time I've been blessed to know you, I've seen your incredible strength and the way you have found beauty even after pain. He paused, gently brushing away a tear that glistened his cheek. I want to spend every day honoring that courage you have shown, the love you still have to give. I want to promise you the kind of love that doesn't fade, the kind that cherishes and uplifts. Every moment, every day. Will you let me be the one who treasures your heart, who stands by your side and holds you through every sunrise and every storm? Please, marry me and let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, Mr. Dennis said as his eyes were filled with emotions. Susan was shocked. Her eyes were filled with tears, but this time around, they were tears of joy. She saw the sincerity in Mr. Dennis' eyes and could not turn him down. With a soft yes, she accepted his proposal. Bamidele was so happy when he heard the news. He had always wanted a father like Mr. Dennis, and fortune indeed smiled at him. Mr. Dennis threw an engagement party in the mansion to celebrate the love of his life. When Akin and Mirabel heard of this, they came to beg her so they could be on her good side, but Susan rejected them. You made it clear that you were dead years ago. I want you to keep it that way. I dug a grave for you both, so to me, you both are dead and I have no plans of associating with ghosts. Henceforth, you don't exist and I don't ever want to see you in my house or close to my family again, Susan said as she ordered the security to throw them out. Few days later, Susan and Mr. Dennis got married. Bamidele changed his name from Akins to Dennis. After his graduation, Mr. Dennis entrusted the company to Bamidele, his newfound son, and they lived happily ever after, while Akin and Mirabel faded away, moving from one street to the other, looking for food to eat. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to today's story. Do you think situations like this still happen in the world today? Leave a comment below and do not forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories. We love and appreciate you, and I would love to see you in our next story. In the village of Ileoro, the elders had one strict rule: never leave your clothes outside overnight. They warned that the Oso, a wandering spirit, loved to dance with clothes left in the line. If it found them too pleasing, it would claim their owners. Children grew up fearing the tail, always hurrying to take their clothes before sunset. But Abeni, a strong-willed and hardworking girl, never believed such stories. She always thought they were meant to scare little children. One fateful day, Abeni walked from morning till night. She had gone to the stream to fetch water, helped her mother to sell food in the market, and later washed a pile of clothes. Abeni, don't forget to bring in the clothes before it gets dark, oh, her mother called, as she pounded yam for the evening meal. I will, Mama, Abeni replied, but she was exhausted. After eating, she sat to enjoy the cool evening breeze. As she rested, sleep crept in slowly, wrapping around her like a warm blanket. Before she knew it, she fell fast asleep. The moon rose, the night deepened, and the village grew silent. When Abeni finally woke up, she gasped. Her clothes, they were still outside. She rushed out. The night was strangely quiet. The wind whispered through the trees. Her clothes swayed gently in the line. Relieved, she muttered, all these old stories for nothing. But just as she stretched her hands to grab her wrapper, the night changed. A deep chilling laughter echoed in the air. The wrapper lifted by itself, twisting and turning as though dancing. Abeni's heart pounded. She stepped back. Omo Kekere, a voice whispered, you left it for me, now come and dance. The wrapper shot towards her, wrapping around her waist. It lifted her off the ground. The trees blurred past as an invisible force dragged her towards the forest. She struggled, but the more she fought, the tighter it held her. Then she remembered her grandmother's words. If the Oso comes for you, call your mother's name. Only a mother's love can break the curse. With all her strength, she screamed, Mama, Mama, help me. A loud clap of thunder filled the sky. Abeni fell to the ground. The wrapper dropped beside her lifeless. The wind stopped, and the night returned to silence. Villagers found her shaking at the edge of the forest. She told them everything. The others nodded. You have been warned. The Oso never forgets. Days passed. Abeni tried to move on, but something was different. At first, it was just whispers in the wind. She would hear her name being called when no one was around. Then she started seeing shadows at the corner of her eyes. At night, she felt a presence in her room. Her clothes would move even when there was no wind. Sometimes, she woke up to find them arranged in a strange way, as if someone had played with them. One evening, as she pounded yam with her mother, her hand froze. She heard it again, the same deep, airy laughter. Abeni, the voice whispered, come and dance. She screamed and dropped the pestle. Her mother rushed to her. Abeni, what is it? I don't know, she stammered. It got worse. Every night she saw the Oso spirit. It would sit at the foot of her bed, watching her with invisible eyes. She tried to tell the people, but no one believed her. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She was losing her mind. The spirit followed her everywhere. It whispered to her while she fetched water. It laughed at her in the market. One afternoon, while helping her mother in the market, she heard the laugh again, loud and clear. She spun around, expecting to see someone, but the only thing moving was her own wrapper, swaying in the wind. The moment she looked at it, it lifted slightly off the ground, as if something unseen was gripping its edges, twirling it in a slow, deliberate dance. She let out a shriek and stumbled backwards. The market women turned to stare. Their faces were full of concern. "Abeni, are you alright?" her mother asked, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Abeni tried to explain, but how could she make them believe what she saw? That night, she locked herself in her room, but the torment did not stop. The spirit was growing bolder. The next morning, she found footprints, strange, unfamiliar footprints all over her room. They circled her bed, leading to her wardrobe, where her clothes hung neatly, but one was missing, her wrapper. Panic gripped Abeni. She turned around, her breath shallow and gasped. The wrapper was now laid out on the floor, perfectly smooth, as if someone had been lying inside it. Tears filled her eyes. She grabbed it and threw it into the fire outside, watching as the flame consumed it. But the laughter did not stop. One night, she woke up unable to move, a weight pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The laughter filled her ears. It was close now, so close she could feel the breath of the unseen entity on her face. Abeni whimpered, struggling against the invisible force holding her down. The bed beneath her began to shake. Her arms flailed, knocking over a clay lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. The noise startled her mother, who rushed in. The moment her mother stepped into the room, the pressure lifted, the shadow retreated, and the air became still again. Abeni burst into tears. "Mama, it won't leave me." Her mother sat beside her, rocking her gently, whispering prayers into her hair. The villagers started to believe something was truly wrong. One day, as she fetched water, she glanced at the stream and saw her reflection wasn't hers. It smiled at her. She screamed, dropping her calabash. The water rippled, distorting the airy image, but she could still hear its voice. "Come and dance." She ran back to the village, her feet barely touching the ground, her heart pounding like a talking drum. That evening, a pastor from the city came to Ileoro for evangelism. He heard about Abeni, so he decided to visit her. He saw Abeni sitting alone, staring blankly at the sky. "She's cursed," the villagers whispered. The pastor knelt beside her. "What troubles you, my child?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "The Oso spirit, it won't leave me." The pastor prayed for her. He placed his hand on her head and commanded the spirit to leave. Abeni let out a loud scream. The wind howled and the trees shook. The villagers watched in fear as a dark shadow rose from Abeni's body and disappeared into the sky. Immediately she collapsed. Everyone was in awe, and for 3 days she lay still, as if caught between life and death. Her mother wept, praying for her child to recover. Then on the 4th day, Abeni woke up. She felt a sign of relief. She was free. The Oso spirit has left her and he never came back. Abeni fell on her knees and began to cry, wishing she had listened to her parents earlier on. Abeni's story became a tale that was passed down to every generation in the village. Until today, people still believe that whenever someone in Ileoro leaves their clothes outside overnight, The wind whispers softly, "Come and dance." This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to today's story. Do you believe such spirits still exist? Could there be unseen forces watching over the things we leave behind at night? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so more people can hear this warning. Who knows? Someone might need to be reminded. Never leave your clothes outside overnight. Stay safe and we'll see you in our next story time. A leaked report surfaced online, listing past donors and their details. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the names. Then she saw it. Donor number 4782, Jide Adedayo. Her breath caught. The description matched her husband's exact physical feature and blood type. The sun was blazing over the busy streets of Lagos as two young boys weaved their way through traffic, balancing trays of pure water on their heads. "Pure water, buy your cold pure water." They shouted together as their voices cracked from a long day under the scorching heat. Kunle and Jide have been friends as long as they could remember. They grew up in the same Face Me I Face You compound in Ajegunle, sharing not just their childhood but also their struggles. Life has never been kind to them. Kunle lost his parents to a ghastly accident when he was just 6. His uncle took him in but treated him like a slave. Jide, on the other hand, had a mother, Mama Jide, who worked as a cleaner in a local school. But her tiny salary was never enough to feed both of them. Every morning, before heading to school, they hawked pure water and groundnuts to earn a little money. After school, they would run errands for people, washing cars, carrying heavy bags for market women, and sometimes even polishing shoes by the roadside. But despite their hardship, they held on to their dreams. Kunle wanted to become an engineer, while Jide dreamed of becoming a big businessman. At night, they sat under the dim street lights, struggling to read their tattered school books. Their bodies ached from the day's work, but they never gave up. One particular evening, Jide returned home to find his mother lying in her tin mattress, coughing uncontrollably. "Mama, what is it?" He knelt beside her, his eyes filled with fear. "I'm fine, my son," she whispered, but her voice was weak. She wasn't fine. Days passed and her condition worsened. Jide did everything he could, fetching herbal drinks from old women, begging neighbors for help, but the sickness refused to leave her frail body. One night, her breathing became labored. "Mama, let's go to the hospital," Jide pleaded, tears streaming down his face. She hesitated, but eventually they made their way to a nearby private hospital. The doctor examined her and wrote some prescriptions. "She needs immediate treatment," the doctor said. Jide's heart lifted. "Thank you, sir. Please start now." The doctor's expression darkened. "Are you paying with cash now?" Jide hesitated. "Doctor, I don't have money now, but I swear I will. I'm sorry, but no treatment without payment." "Doctor, please," Jide begged, holding his mother's trembling hand. "She's dying." "No money, no treatment," the doctor said coldly before walking away. That night, Jide watched as his mother gasped for breath and finally stilled. She was gone. Jide let out a heart-wrenching scream, shaking her lifeless body. Kunle found him the next morning, curled beside his mother's corpse, his eyes swollen from crying. They let her die, Kunle. They let her die because of money. That day, something inside Jide changed. I will never be poor again, he vowed, his fists clenched. I will do whatever it takes to be rich. With his mother gone, Jide worked even harder. He and Kunle juggled hawking with school, but the hunger and exhaustion took their toll. After years of struggle, they finally gained admission into the University of Lagos. But university life came with a new kind of hardship. Money for school fees, textbooks, accommodation, and feeding was hard to come by. One afternoon, Jide collapsed in the middle of the market. Jide, Jide, wake up, Kunle shouted, shaking him. Someone suggested that they take him to a nearby hospital. After a brief checkup, the nurse said, "He is weak from malnutrition and exhaustion. Please try and be eating well and make time to rest also," the nurse advised as she wrote them a prescription. As they were leaving, Jide overheard two young men talking. "Guy, I don't donate blood 3 times this month." One said, "The money is not bad, sha. Hospital they pay well." Jide's ears perked up. Kunle noticed. "Jide, I know what you are thinking. Don't even. We need the money," Jide interrupted. "If selling my blood will give me money, then I will." The next day, they visited a private hospital and signed up as donors. To survive, they started donating blood at private hospitals in exchange for money. It was painful and exhausting, but it paid some of their bills. "Jide, are you sure this is safe?" Kunle asked one evening as they walked out of a hospital after another round of blood donation. "What choice do we have?" Jide replied. "We need the money. I have no one to send me money." Kunle sighed and nodded. They continued the practice for months, donating blood every couple of weeks. At first, it seemed like a good idea, but the process was exhausting. Jide fainted after donating twice in 1 week. Kunle panicked. "Jide, we have to stop this." Jide wiped his sweaty face. "We can't stop. We need the money." The process became unhealthy, and Kunle was no longer participating as usual. One day, while waiting at the hospital, they overheard a conversation between two men. "Forget blood donation," one of them said, laughing. "Sperm donation is the real deal. They pay good money at his Great Memorial Hospital." Kunle and Jide looked at each other in shock. "Sperm Bank?" Jide whispered. "Yes, rich couple who can't have children come to buy sperm from donors." The other man continued. "If your sperm meets their criteria, they pay heavily." That night, Jide could not sleep. "Kunle, do you think we should try it?" Kunle sat up. "No way. Selling blood is one thing, but donating sperm, that's a different matter." "But we need the money," Jide insisted. "This is easier than selling blood, and the pay is better." Kunle shook his head. "Jide, we have to draw the line somewhere. I can't do it. I'll find other ways to survive." Jide sighed and turned away, but his mind was made up. The next morning, while Kunle was searching for part-time jobs on campus, Jide made his way to his Grace Memorial Hospital. The sperm bank process was easier than he thought. After a few tests, he was accepted as a donor. Every few days, he would visit the hospital and donate. The money kept flowing in. At first, He kept it a secret from Kunle, but soon Kunle noticed that Jide was suddenly dressing well and eating good food. Jide, where are you getting all this money from? Kunle asked one evening. Jide replied, I got a side hustle. Kunle frowned. I hope you are not donating your sperm. Jide smirked. What's wrong with that? The hospital is making millions from it, and I'm just getting my share. Kunle sighed. Jide, you don't know where those sperms go. What if you have children all over the place without knowing? Jide laughed. So what? It's not my problem. I need the money and this is my way of making it. Kunle shook his head but said nothing more. He had done his part of warning his friend. Years passed. Kunle graduated and started working as an engineer. He struggled, but he remained honest. Jide, on the other hand, had become a businessman, dressing in expensive clothes and driving flashy cars. One day, Jide met a very beautiful woman named Adesua. She was the daughter of a wealthy businessman named Chief Williams. Adesua fell in love with Jide, and in less than a year, they got married in a grand wedding ceremony. As a wedding gift, Chief Williams made Jide the general manager of one of his companies. Jide had finally arrived. He lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, and attended elite social events. But there was one thing Adesua did not know: Jide's past as a sperm donor. A couple of years later, Kunle married Morenike, a simple, beautiful woman who supported him through tough times. They had 3 children and lived modestly but happily. For years, Jide and Adesua lived happily with their 2 children and a perfect life until Adesua stumbled upon an article about sperm donation. One evening, out of curiosity, she searched for his Grace Memorial Hospital donor record. A leaked report surfaced online, listing past donors and their details. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the names. Then she saw it. Donor number 4782, Jide Adedayo. Her breath caught. The description matched her husband's exact physical feature and blood type. Her hands trembled. That night when Jide came home, Adesua was waiting for him. Jide, she said, her voice cold. Did you ever donate sperm at his Grace Memorial Hospital? Jide's face paled. Why are you asking? Answer me. He exhaled. Yes, but it was a long time ago. I needed money. Tears welled in her eyes. Do you know how many children you have out there? It doesn't matter, Adesua. It was before I met you. But it does matter. What if our own children unknowingly married their half-siblings? Jide was speechless and buried his face in his hands. He had never thought of that. Adesua stood up. I can't stay in this marriage, Jide. You lied to me. You hid something so big from me. I need time to think. Adesua packed her bags and left the house. For 5 weeks, Jide begged and pleaded before she finally forgave him. But the foundation of their marriage was cracked. Jide promised to change and not to bring shame to her name. But this was the beginning of their problem. One day, Kunle's son took ill mysteriously. When he was rushed to the hospital, the doctor said that they needed to operate on him as soon as possible. Kunle did not have the money they requested, but he and Morenike were able to come up with 70% of the money. But the hospital refused to commence surgery until he deposits at least 90% of the fee. Kunle had no choice than to turn to Jide for help. He had been avoiding Jide because of how proud he had become. Jide began to look down on him because of his financial capacity and the type of family he married from. Kunle had to put everything aside because he was desperate to save his son. Jide, my son is sick. I need money for surgery. Please help us. You are the only one I can turn to. Jide scoffed. Go and sell sperm like I did. The sperm bank is still open. In a week, you will be able to come up with the money. Please, Jide, you know I can't do that. I am a married man. I have principles that I abide with, and I cannot disrespect my wife that way. Even if I was to do it, I do not have that time. I promise to pay you back with interest, Jide. Please, Kunle begged. So I'm the one who does not have principles. I'm wayward and disrespectful, right? Jide said angrily. No, that's not what I meant. Before Kunle could say anything, Jide left him behind without offering any help. Kunle was heartbroken. He had to take a risky loan, which approval was delayed. But the surgery came too late. His son died. Kunle and his wife were devastated. They buried their son amidst tears and mourned him for the longest time. After years of struggle, fortune finally smiled on them. Kunle landed a major engineering contract that changed his life. When the deal was concluded, he became one of the most respected engineers in Lagos. Jide had everything a man could dream of: a beautiful wife, a thriving business, and an elite social status. But as his wealth grew, so did his pride. The man Adesua had fallen in love with was slowly transforming into someone else. He craved more power, more luxury, and unfortunately, more women. It all started subtly. At first, it was harmless flirtation at business events. Then, it turned into secret meetings, expensive gifts, and whispered promises. The most dangerous of them all was Tiwa, a young, ambitious college student who caught Jide's attention at a charity event he sponsored. Tiwa was different from the other women. She was intelligent, confident, and had a striking resemblance to someone Jide couldn't quite place. She was interning at one of his companies, and their professional meetings slowly turned into personal conversations. Sir, I really admire your success story, she had said one evening after a meeting. You built an empire from nothing. That's inspiring. Jide chuckled, sipping his whiskey. Success comes with sacrifices. Tiwa, you will understand when you get older. But you don't look like someone who has suffered much, she teased. That was how it began. Playful banter, late night calls, and soon, Jide found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He started spoiling her with gifts. A designer bag here, an expensive watch there. But when Tiwa jokingly mentioned that she had never been on a vacation before, Jide took things a step further. Jide arranged a weekend getaway to Dubai under the guise of business trip. Tiwa had never experienced such luxury. Private jets, five-star hotels, and shopping sprees that could make anyone dizzy. This feels like a dream, she whispered one night as she stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the city. Jide pulled her closer, smirking. With me, dreams become reality. From then on, their affair became a well-orchestrated secret. He would fly her to exotic destinations under the pretense of business trips. He booked the most exclusive resorts, ensuring that they were always discreet. He showered her with expensive gifts and paid for her tuition. But no matter how careful he was, Adesua began to notice the changes. At first, she dismissed the late night meetings and unexplained transactions as part of Jide's growing business empire. But then, the signs became too obvious to ignore. His sudden obsession with his appearance, the secretive phone calls, the expensive gifts charged to their account. One evening, while Jide was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Adesua glanced at the screen. I miss you already. Last night was amazing. Her heart pounded. She picked up the phone and saw multiple messages from the same number. The truth was staring at her in the face. The next day, she hired a private investigator. Within weeks, she had all the proof she needed. Pictures of Jide and Tiwa at exclusive resorts, bank statements showing lottery purchases, and even flight records. One evening, Jide walked into the living room to find Adesua sitting calmly, a folder on her lap. Jide, she said in a controlled voice, who is Tiwa? Jide's body tensed. She's just a staff member. Why do you ask? Adesua smiled bitterly and slid the folder across the table. Then explained these. Jide flipped through the pages. Pictures of him and Tiwa, hotel receipts, travel documents. His face paled. Adesua, I can explain. No need, she cut in. I've seen enough. I trusted you, Jide. I believed in our marriage. But you threw it all away for a girl half your age. Adesua, please. She stood up, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm done, Jide. I want a divorce. Jide dropped to his knees. Please, Adesua, I love you. I'll end it, I swear. But the damage was done. A few weeks later, Adesua filed for divorce. The news spread like wildfire, tarnishing Jide's reputation in high society. But the worst was yet to come. As if fate had a cruel sense of irony, Tiwa soon discovered a truth that shattered her world. One day, while going through some old documents at home, she found a file from the fertility clinic her mother had visited years ago. Curiosity got the best of her, and she decided to find out who her father was. Suspecting that her biological father was someone she had never met. When the report came in, she nearly collapsed. Jide, the man she had trusted, the man she had been with. Her hands shook as she dialed his number. When he answered, she could barely speak. Jide, her voice cracked. Tell me it's not true. What are you talking about? I did an investigation, she whispered. You are my biological father. Silence. Jide's phone slipped from his hands. His mind raced. No, that's not possible, he stammered. But deep down, he knew. Jide felt ashamed and disgusted. He couldn't find the courage to console Tiwa, his lover, who was actually his daughter. Jide locked himself in his office for days, drowning in whiskey and regret. The empire he built, The wealth he had accumulated, none of it mattered anymore. He had lost everything. Adeswa was gone. His reputation was in ruins. And worst of all, he had unknowingly hurt his daughter in an unimaginable way. For the first time in his life, Jide realized that money could not fix everything. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, a broken man trapped in the consequences of his own choices. He had vowed to make money at all costs, but he never imagined the cost would be his soul. Unable to accept the reality of being intimate with her father, Tiwa took her own life after sharing a post about her greatest mistake on her Facebook page. Just like wind, the post circulated around the internet. The next morning, the internet exploded. Unbelievable, young woman takes her life after DNA reveals shocking truth about her father, Jide Adedayo. Illicit affair ends in tragedy. A father unknowingly romances his daughter. Adeswa Williams' ex-husband caught in a genetic scandal. The headlines were relentless. Within hours, Tiwa's story was everywhere. News channels, blogs, and social media. People dug into Jide's past, uncovering the sperm donation records that had remained buried for years. It was no longer a private scandal. It was a national disgrace. Jide barely had time to process what had happened before the call started flooding in. His phone rang. It was the board of directors. Jide, we need to talk now. He arrived at his company's headquarters to find the boardroom packed. The directors sat stiffly, their expression grave. Jide, the chairman began, his voice cold. This scandal is beyond repair. Our investors are pulling out. Our stock value had dropped overnight. The media is having a feed day. Jide ran a hand over his face. I can fix this. Give me time. There is no fixing this, another director cut in. You are toxic to this company. Effective immediately, you are being removed as CEO. Jide was shocked. You can't do this. I built this company from scratch. And now you've destroyed it, the chairman said simply. Security will escort you out. As Jide was led out of the building, reporters swarmed him. Mr. Adedayo, do you have anything to say about Tiwa's death? Did you know that she was your daughter? What did you have to say about the leak records? Jide pushed past them, but the damage was done. His name was forever tarnished. Jide returned home, but it no longer felt like home. The mansion was too big, too empty. Adeswa was gone, his wife, his uncle. His company was gone, his empire. And worst of all, Tiwa was gone. Guilt wrapped around his chest like chains, suffocating him. He stopped eating, he stopped sleeping. The whiskey bottles piled up. He barely left his room. The voices in his head wouldn't stop. I did a DNA test. You are my biological father. I trusted you, Jide. Some truths are too painful to bear. Goodbye. One evening, he stared at the ceiling. Was this what he had worked for? He had vowed to make money at all costs, to be rich, powerful, untouchable, but at what price? His best friend Kunle was living a quiet, successful life with his family. His wife had left him, his children scattered across the world, wanting nothing to do with him. And Tiwa was gone because of him. Jide collapsed on the floor, his body shaking with silent sobs. For the first time in his life, he realized money meant nothing, and now it was too late to change anything. When Kule heard about Jide's downfall, he was shocked. Jide did what? He whispered, gripping his phone. The details of the scandal made his stomach turn. He rushed to Jide's house, only to find him in a terrible state. Drunk, unshaven, and barely responsive. Jide, look at yourself, Kunle said disgusted. Is this what all the money was for? Jide chuckled bitterly. I won, Kule. I got rich. I had power and now I have nothing. Kunle clenched his fist. I warned you. I told you not to play with people's lives. You refused to help me when I needed you. You told me to sell my sperm like you did, and now look at you. Jide let out a hollow laugh. You are right. I should have listened, but it's too late now. Kunle sighed, shaking his head. I pity you, Jide, but I can't save you from this. No one can. Kunle left, and for the second time, Jide realized he had spent his entire life chasing money, yet he had lost everything that truly mattered. His best friend, his wife, his child, and worst of all, his soul. This is the end of this story. The story teaches that money is not everything. Jide chased wealth at all costs, but in the end, he lost everything that truly mattered. His family, his reputation, and his happiness. Our choices have consequences, and taking shortcuts can lead to disaster. Unlike Jide, Kunle chose the honest path and found lasting success. Secondly, pride and arrogance can destroy a person. Jide thought he was untouchable, but his pride led to his downfall. Family, love, and integrity are far more valuable than wealth. Betrayal and dishonesty will always come back to haunt us. In life, true success is not measured by money, but by the relationship we build and the legacy we leave behind. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and you want more thrilling and emotional content like this, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button if this story touched you and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Your support keeps this channel going, and I promise you, the best is yet to come. Subscribe now and be part of this amazing community. Until next time, bye.